there was a incident between Johnny and Amber here during that trip. Amber was telling him that he was a washed up actor. He was going to die a fat, lonely old man. Then you heard, you hit me with a can. You heard Johnny say, you hit me with a can. And then he came down the steps and Amber was behind him and she had a bottle in her hand. It was removed and there was a brief pause at the moment, I think of initial shock or uncertainty of why, that we were there. Neither Johnny nor Amber knew that we were there. He proceeded to walk back to the John Deere, and she again walked. He was just sitting in the seat. Amber came up to him and was asking him to come back in the house. That she was sorry. Please come back in the house. He didn't come out of the seat, and she was hugging and kissing him. And I love you. I love you. She was telling him I loved you. He didn't react. Johnny sat there. Eventually got out of the John Deere and proceeded to start to walk away. At that time, Amber started to grab at him and his shirt and trying to pull him back to the house, just basically viciously trying to pull him back and get him back into the house and yelling at him. And at that point, I was between them and felt it was best, and I was getting worried about what was going to happen, and it was best that I remove him from the situation. And so CJ took Amber back to the house, and I walked Johnny over to the cafe, which was basically 30 seconds away from the house, because it was the only place I could take him to at the time.
What did you observe when you went back to the cafe with Mr. Depp?
When we went back to the cafe, he had a mark across the bridge of his nose. I got a bag of ice to put on it so that it wouldn't swell, just to make sure that it wasn't bleeding. And he walked over to the love seat at the cafe and he laid down and went to sleep. And CJ came back over and I asked CJ to stay there for the remainder of the morning. And I left CJ inside the cafe and I left Johnny on the couch.
When did you next see Miss Heard?
That morning, I saw her that morning.
How close were you to Miss Heard when you interacted with her the next morning?
Conversation in a couple feet away.
When you saw her, how did she appear?
They had guests leaving, and it was kind of a normal morning, going down to the beach to see the guests leave.
What, if any, makeup was Miss Heard wearing?
Again, I'm not sure. If she wore makeup on the island, if it was very natural looking.
What, if any, injuries did you observe on Miss Heard?
I didn't observe any.
What, if any, injuries did you observe on Mr. Depp?
The marking across the bridge of his nose.
As a result of the work that you performed, did you form any opinions with respect to Ms. Heard?
I did.
What were those opinions?
The results of Ms. Heard's evaluation supported 2 diagnoses: borderline personality disorder and histrionic personality disorder.
What is a diagnosis?
A diagnosis is a way that that psychologists, psychiatrists, anybody in the mental health field thinks about a disorder. It helps us to communicate a set of symptoms that a person is experiencing, and along with that set of symptoms, it tells other professionals a lot about how those symptoms might have developed, how that person might behave, perceive the world. It also drives treatment. The real purpose is to determine what sort of interventions will be most effective for the person.
What conclusions were you able to draw about Ms. Heard's sophistication from her testing?
Well, from her testing and from her presentation, she was very likable. but her testing in particular showed that she approached it in a manner that, remember I told you about those scales that are pretty neat. She approached it in a manner that very clearly minimized any psychological dysfunction, not just that, but really presented herself as free of any problems. And she did so in a way that was very, very sophisticated, not obvious, by responding to questions that most people might not notice were trying to detect that.
And when you first saw Amber Heard, she was crying, red-eyed, and was not making eye contact with you, correct?
Correct.
And you asked her a few questions, and it was quite clear that she did not want to speak to the police. Is that correct?
Correct.
Now, Amber Heard was visibly upset, so she would look down. Sometimes she would look up at you when she spoke, but was back and forth, correct?
Correct.
What was Amber Heard wearing that night?
I don't recall.
What hairstyle did Amber Heard have that night?
I don't recall.
Now, when was the first time you were asked to provide details of the events of May 21, 2016?
I don't recall.
Do you recall providing your testimony at a deposition in July of 2016?
Correct.
Is that the first time you were asked to provide any details of what your recollection was of the events of May 21, 2016?
Correct.
Okay. And that was roughly 2 months later, is that correct?
Correct.
And how many shifts had you worked in that 2-month period?
I'm not aware. I don't know.
How many calls had you answered in those 2 months?
I don't know that number.
How many of those calls were domestic violence calls in those 2 months?
I don't know that number.
And if you saw any signs of injury on Amber Heard, or even just damage to property, would you have been duty bound to make a report?
Correct.
Now, your recollection is that there was no damage to the flat. You searched the entire flat and there was no damage, broken glass, or anything out of the ordinary. Would you agree?
Correct.
Did you see anything, did you observe anything out of the ordinary during this particular call that you answered at the penthouse on May 21, 2016?
I did not.
When you left that call, when you got back into that elevator, do you recall what you were thinking?
I remember being impressed by the penthouse, how big and beautiful it was, yes.
But anything else?
No, nothing.
And just so we can stay on that for a minute, you had not heard of Amber Heard at the time of this report, right, on May 21st, 2016?
Correct.
But you did know that Johnny Depp was an actor, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And you didn't know that that was Johnny Depp's penthouse when you reported there, correct?
Correct.